Hey everybody, it's Anna J. Wallner with the Author Library, and this morning I am delighted to be joined by Helen Garraway. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, indeed. Hi, everybody. My name is, Anna says, is Helen Garraway. I'm based out of the UK and I'm a fantasy author. I've written an epic fantasy series and I'm just about to launch my second book. My first book, Sentinels Awaken, was released in October 2020. So I was a lockdown 2020 author debut, but now I'm into my second book and that launches, Sentinels Rising, launches on the 17th of March.
And it is an epic. You just showed me this book, and
Yes,
it
yes.
is
It
the
is one. That's the first one, Sentinels Awaken.
it's gorgeous and it is thick. So, yes, the second one, yes. So it is
Yes,
definitely
don't they?
an epic an epic read, an epic series.
I
Uh,
wanted that really epic feel to the covers, that landscape, and it goes all the way around, and it gives you that feel that we're going to go on a big adventure and a quest, and there's a lot going to happen. So it's going to keep you entertained and engrossed all the way through. It's great fun writing it, and I must admit, I wrote them for me. I was writing the books, and I had the ideas, and I sort of started writing, I suppose, about 4 years ago. It was one of those, it's not a perfect storm, but one of those storms of events where everything comes together. And unfortunately, my mum passed away, and then my daughter went off to university, and I had a home alone with my cat and lots of time all of a sudden on my hands. So all the ideas bubbling in my head, I started writing down. And I did do a blog once, and I was saying almost, I think sometimes writing is a bit cathartic. It gives you an opportunity to get things out of your system and onto paper. And I think maybe that was what I was also doing, as well as having fun writing fantasy novels. So kept me
abs-
busy.
Absolutely. And
Remarkable.
Remargarin is the world that you've built. And in it, we find Gerald, who's running for his life and happens upon the lady Lelandi.
Leandri, yes. Yeah, the goddess, Lady Leandri, yes.
And from there we discover about the realm and the magic that exists there. So what was it like to imagine this completely different magical realm and world?
Yeah. I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts of writing is creating your own world. And I must admit that I did get carried away in the end, and it just kept growing, and I just kept thinking of new ideas and new things. And when I was first, when the ideas first start to bubble, you just get the bubbling of ideas, and it's a case of capturing those ideas onto paper, and then they just develop and go in their own direction. And I began with the trees, actually. I was thinking of ancient trees, and that was where the sentinels ended up being housed in the trees to protect them, because what happens is it's like it's been for 3,000 years that these sentinels have been asleep in the trees, and they were put into those trees because the Lady Leandri destroyed what's called the bloodstone, which meant all magic was removed from the world, and that meant anything magical couldn't remain. So she sort of banished herself and then encased her guards in these sentinel trees to protect them until such time as magic came back. And of course, now 3,000 years later, things are happening, and there's an insidious disease sort of moving through the country, and people are not acting in the way that they should be. They're being influenced by spells and other things, and it's now magic is creeping back in. It's not necessarily a good thing because it's being used for the wrong purposes, and the lady needs her captain to help protect her people. So that's really the story, and that's where we come in and we meet Gerald, who's a King's Ranger, and he doesn't know that he's going to be her captain. But he accidentally wakes one of the men, one of the sentinels that's asleep in the tree. And then we go from there as we learn about the sentinels and what happened and how he helps Gerald try and save their country. So it is quite a quest. It's understanding what's happening. So it's almost a mystery and an adventure, but it's also set in a fantasy setting.
I love that you've incorporated so many different facets into the storyline. That's one of the things that keeps the reader interested, but us as a writer, as an author, to write those stories, as
Yeah.
long as we're interested and intrigued by where our characters take us and the story takes us, it really does come through on the page, and then it's very exciting to read.
I know, and that's the fun bit as well, because as you develop your characters, they really do take a life of their own.
Yes.
And they take you in directions that you don't really intend. And it was quite funny when I was writing the first book, is that Gerald was my first character, and he's the one that really doesn't know what's going on when it starts. You know, he's like, this can't be real. It's all myth and legend. You know, this can't possibly be a person in the tree. You know, he just thinks he's imagining it or hallucinating. But as we get to know Valerian, who's the Sentinel that he first awakes, and the Sentinel starts to really become involved in the story, and we understand from his viewpoint what happened. And obviously part of it also is him adjusting to the new world. I had to be very careful because I sort of fell in love with Valerian, to be quite honest. And then he was threatening to take over the story. And, you know, you have to keep that balance between your main character and your, and I would say I've almost got two main characters in Gerald and Valerian, because they're both very strong and very, instrumental to the story. But Gerald was the first character I wrote, and then Valerian was the second. But they do have minds of their own, but I guess that's them getting their own back because I put them through hell. So
That's so funny. Yes, I understand that how sometimes a secondary character or even a tertiary character that you didn't intend to play such a large role just takes on their own unique personality, and you as an author want to write more about them. And believe it or not, I mean, the readers want to know more about them too, probably, because they're like, oh, this is interesting. I want
yeah,
to see
and that's what
more.
you want. You want characters that people are going to engage with, and that they
Yes.
want to know more, so they're going to follow the story and get engrossed. And that's what I think, with the book certainly that I wrote, right? The intention is to be immersive. You know, when I'm writing, I'm in the world, I'm seeing the world, I see how my characters react to the world, and I could live in my world, to be quite honest. And in this day and age, I think I'd rather live in a different world, but
Uh-huh.
that's beside the point. But I mean, that's just the whole escapism, and that's why I think the fun part is the world building, because you want it to be real but different. So you've got to be able to relate to it, but know that it's not our world. So yeah, so that's the fun bit. And I started off with Vesperi, which is the first world, which is like a kingdom of forests, ancient forests and lakes, and I call them watches, you know, rather than states or counties, for example. But I call them watches, which divides the country up into areas, and they all have their slightly different sort of details of what they're like and how they fit together. But as I wrote that, and then the ideas for the next book, which is Sentinel Rising, came, I said, well, we now need to explore a bit more of the world. So then it's like, right, we've got ancient forests. So now we're going to go to the neighboring country of Tyrolia, who's very desert-like. So it is deserts and very hot and very, you know, blue skies, hot sun, baking sands, sand dunes, all of those rich reds, yellows, and oranges. And you know, you just melt because it's so hot, sort of thing. And then you then can evolve into the people of those lands who are more nomadic, because it's too hot and there's not enough water. So you move around to wherever the water is, and then that evolves into that whole cultural structure for that world, and they experience it as they travel through to try and solve the problems that they have to solve in book 2. Because obviously, even though whatever happens in book 1, which I'm not going to tell you because you've got to read it,
Right.
it doesn't stop there, because the people they are obviously trying to prevent from taking over the world retaliate in book 2, and things only get worse. So
That is
yeah.
just listening to you describe the the bit of world building that you've done, or the bit of the world that you've created. I'm already able to envision the land of the forests and the lands of the desert, and how you create that, or to make those certain cultural distinctions based on where they're located at.
Yeah.
That's that's awesome. I
Yeah,
mean,
and of course then extending from that, is creating the maps that go with it. Because I created a scroll of the map, and if you go on my Instagram, you'll see my scroll, and then you'll see, if you swipe, you'll see what the map designer did for me to create the map to put in the book. So I drew it so that I could figure out where everybody was and how long it took to get from one place to another, for consistency more than anything else, just to make sure that I was being consistent in how long it took people to get, and whether they were going north, east, south, or west, and I wasn't suddenly going in the reverse direction accidentally, things like that. But then the map also, I think, is an integral part of the book, because I think people love to be able to relate on
Yes.
the map itself. So yeah, so we've got 2 so far, and then I'm currently working on my 3rd book, Sentinel's Justice, which is set in Alothia, which is to the north. So of course, being to the north, it's colder. So now we're going to hit the tundra and the ice and the mountains and the very cold, snowy landscapes, and the sort of type of the world that you would, or the country that you would meet there. So yes, so it changes. Each book sort of does change as the environment. And then book 4 is south, and we go into the archipelago of islands, and we discover why they're an archipelago and how they got drowned, sort of thing.
Wow. I mean, yes, so much world building that you've already come up with. High fantasy and epic fantasy is always so intriguing and impressive to me, because of the imagination required behind the creation of these worlds, and you got it down. I mean, I am already drawn in to want to read the story, just for the experience of that. Like you said, it is immersive, because the way that you describe it, I'm already seeing these things in my mind as you're talking, let alone when I pick up the book,
Yeah.
then to be transported to this completely different landscape. But you've also included those bits of realism in there, for continuity purposes, of how you would live in certain climates, and, as you said, how long it takes to get from one place to another. So it's almost, you almost make the fantasy believable
Yeah.
with good world building.
Yeah, and I think that makes it easier for the reader. I mean, I think sometimes if it's too extreme, you're spending all the time trying to remember who is what and what that word means, and you're constantly translating in your head, so you're not necessarily enjoying the story. I mean, I'm very much, these are the types of books that I grew up on, that I love to read. I read David Eddings, and I loved Mary Stewart and all of her Arthurian books. And one of my favorite authors is Lois McMaster Bujold and her 5 Worlds series, and the Chalian series, and they're just my favorite sorts of books, and that's very similar to the type of book that I've written, and that's where I sort of grew up, and those living in books that did a lot of world building. So that's where I think I obviously get it from, because I've read a lot of books that do world build. So that's helped me be able to extrapolate that into my stories.
And taking inspiration from the things that you read. That's why it's so important. For I think that's, from what we were talking about before, the natural progression of being a voracious reader to then creating short stories. And for me, it was journaling. I keep a daily journal, and then my journal started to almost take on like a storytelling of the day, and I was like, it's like I'm writing
It's
my
just natural, isn't it? You just like words. You just have to put words together and build something. Yeah.
and so then that, kept progressing. And so that's the great thing about the culture that we're in now values books and reading. And so that's a great thing. I was encouraged as a child, as you said you were, by your mom.
Yeah, my mum was a voracious reader. I mean, she was one of these women that would read a book, watch the telly, and knit at the same time. It's just unbelievable that she could do 3 things at once. I mean, I got the reading and the watching the telly, but I just never got the knitting. That just wasn't my thing, I'm afraid. But she certainly passed on the love of books, and I read anything that was going. So not just fantasy, although that's my love, and I prefer fantasy. I read mysteries and romances. And so you pull elements of that into the story, because your story, my story, is a high fantasy, epic fantasy, but there's still adventure, there's still mystery, there's still romance. You've still got the characters interacting between each other and their relationships and the emotions. And for me, with this story, it's also how the Sentinels, and really you see more of that in book 2, because really book 1 they've only just awoken, but in book 2 we're starting to see their memories of where they came from, what they've lost, how they're adjusting their relationships between each other, and how they manage to deal with that, as well as try and save the world at the same time, of course.
That's quite a list.
Yeah, keeps them busy. Yes.
So the second book in the series is scheduled is for pre-order now, guys, and it is releasing actually on your daughter's birthday here in
Yes,
just a couple of weeks.
March 17th. Yes, it's a birthday gift to my daughter. So I've dedicated the book to my daughter Jennifer, and it's her birthday on the 17th. So we're releasing the book for her birthday. So yes, it's quite exciting. Can't believe it's only a couple of weeks away. It's quite amazing. It comes around quick.
And so is this the last book in the Sentinel series, or have we only just begun?
So I wrote six going on 7 books. So I have 7 books drafted in the Sentinel's world.
Wow.
The first 3 books were written as a trilogy, but I kept going. It didn't stop. So I just enjoyed writing the characters, and there was more to say. So I just kept going, as I said. So the first 3 are consecutive, and then book 4 is like 2 years later. And then we jump like 18 years and we meet the next generation of their children as well, sort of thing. Though, in these books, they're all between 19 and 22, they're all quite young. So in 20 years time, they're just in their 40s. So it's how they react then with their kids coming through, and what they get up to, how the world changes in time. So it's, yeah, so that was quite fun. And of course, when I was writing book 4, which I haven't named yet, I've come up with a name for it. It's a bit of a time slip one. So in this one, you're actually in the current time, but you go back 3,000 years as well. So you get to really also see more of what happened when the lady thundered the stone and the world blew up, sort of thing. But you also get to see where the Sentinels came from and who they are, and we meet our main Sentinel characters and in how they became Sentinels. So, and I wrote that because in book 4 I needed to know what they were doing at the time back then.
Motivation.
So I had to write the history in order to be able to write book 4, and of course that led to the prequel. Is what it will be once I get that finished. But yeah, they're all written. I just got to edit them, polish them up, and then publish them.
Gotcha. Well, we'll definitely keep a lookout for all of those. And guys, if you haven't read the first in the series, make sure to check out Helen's page on Amazon, and I'll have those links all in the description down below. And the second book in the series is available now for pre-order and releases March 17th. So make sure to check that out.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me today. I've had a wonderful time talking with you and hearing all about the series. I'm hooked, and I know that we're going to be seeing a lot more from you. I can't wait. So guys, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.